Hi, Be Health Empowered family, and welcome back to another week of Excuse Me, Doctor. My name is Dr. Melissa Clarke. Please call me Dr. Mel, and I am delighted to be back here with you all today. Happy Monday. Happy, wonderful week that we are about to kick off for ourselves. So, we are here every single week on Excuse Me Doctor to bring you health topics that are based on science. So you can be confident and empowered when it comes to making decisions about your health for yourself, your family, and your community. We clarify speculation, we clear up misinformation, and we debunk disinformation. And we also let you know when things are changing. We keep you updated as our understanding of our health changes and grows and evolves. So we're streaming on YouTube and Facebook. For my newbies joining for the first time, please remember to hit subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on Facebook, please hit that like button. I really appreciate you for that. So, we have a really special show lined up for you tonight. As you know, there are like 60 million Americans who are still unvaccinated. For some people, it's just finding a convenient time, but to go get vaccinated. But for the majority of the people who have held out from getting vaccinated, it's either due to distrust of the COVID vaccine or those giving it, or anger over a perceived loss of their rights and their autonomy to make a decision for themselves. So tonight we're talking about a really important community, one that's dear to my heart, creatives and entertainers, mainly because of their influence and high profile. My co-producers know people personally who are artists who have lost their lives to COVID. And unlike many other people, creatives and artists and entertainers often have to be in crowds and in close contact with each other. So their thoughts about vaccination status and about prevention become particularly important in that environment. So we have two really special guests who are going to join us, accomplished artists in their own right. And of course, my wonderful co-producers are going to join us. We're going to sit down and talk about our artists a community that are disproportionately, is the artistic community, let me say that. Are they disproportionately not vaccinated? And if that's the case, why? So stay tuned right here. Make sure you're sharing again this particular episode on Facebook. Share it with everybody you know in the entertainment industry whose livelihood is in performance or being with crowds. Share it if you're a fan of go-go, R&B, hip-hop, or you want to be in the crowd who's listening to those wonderful artists and you're wondering if it's safe. Make sure that you share it with everybody, because this is an episode you are not going to want to miss. So, as always, though, to make this show happen and go, I have to bring in my two fabulous co-producers, Miss Lila Mays and Mr. Wayne Bruce. How
What's
y'all doing?
happening?
Hey,
What's happening? What's
good.
happening?
Oh, same. Just happy to be here. And, you know, we have so much to get to. I just want to jump right into the numbers.
Okay.
So, we're at 46.9 million cases of COVID. Um, and, the fact of the matter is, y'all, we are still in a pandemic. We have 30 states right now where numbers are climbing, and we're over 80,000 new cases of COVID happening every day. So even though it seems like there's some places that are taking away mask mandates, the reality of the situation is COVID numbers are going back up.
Wow.
Yep.
And hospitalizations, though, and deaths are still going down, but we know that might rebound as cases go up. A couple weeks later is typically when we see hospitalizations and unfortunately deaths happening again. We're at 760,000 deaths from COVID. 8,000 more deaths have occurred since we were together last week.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an unreal
All
number.
right. Are we looking up on the Vax facts though?
Yeah, we are. We have 195 million people who are vaccinated, 28 million who have gotten their boosters. And I just want to shout out Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico. 'Cause
Oh, Puerto Rico.
yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Well, that is deserved because they have the highest vaccination and lowest transmission rate of any American state or territory. They've vaccinated 74% of their population compared to only 58.7% average vaccination rate in the rest of the United States. Number
Come on,
two is,
PR.
yeah, go on PR. Now, number two is Guam, again, not even on the mainland. And number
Right.
three is Vermont. And what they all kind of have in common is that the vaccine rollout was not politicized in those places. And
Mhm.
for PR in particular, um, the Spanish speaking media that's predominant in that country definitely did not politicize it just like it has been done over here. And that's the thought as to why their vaccination rates are so high.
Wow.
Interesting. All right, I'm gonna go out of order a little bit on the recap, because facts and people who are vaccinated and the behaviors that we're supposed to continue when we're around people who are not, etc. All of that, Dr. Mel, it's so confusing. Can we break this down a little bit?
Absolutely. I got a text from a good friend of mine. She said that she has a friend who's vaccinated who had a house guest, and the
Hmm.
house guest tested positive for COVID.
Mm.
So, what should that vaccinated host do? The person who hosted the friend. What should they do? So, the answer is this: people who are fully vaccinated do not need to quarantine after contact with somebody who tests positive for COVID-19 unless they have symptoms. So if they feel perfectly well, they can go about their life. However, they do need to get tested 5 to 7 days after the exposure, even if they don't have symptoms.
Okay.
Okay.
And they wear a mask indoors in public following the exposure until they know that their test is negative. So
Okay.
Mm,
if it
okay.
if the test is negative, they're good to go. But if it's positive, of course, they should isolate at home for 10 days, just like everybody else.
Wow.
All right.
And there you have it.
So
So,
yeah, and that's let me just add, that's a little different than what's told to unvaccinated people. They
Right.
must quarantine from get go, from the
Mhm.
time they know that they've been exposed, they should quarantine. And then if their test is negative on day 5, they can come off of quarantine after day 7 as long as they don't develop symptoms.
okay. That's cool.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Yep.
Hey, I wanna just, because we're dealing with a show that's entertainment based tonight and dealing with my folks. I just wanna, we had a really tragic concert and situation that happened a few weeks ago with Travis Scott and Astro World, and a young man, 9-year old, lost his life today. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I have to go to number two. I had this at number two. What happens if you're in a crowd crush? Because, I mean, that's the stuff we don't talk about. Like, how do you get
Mhm.
through that, Dr. Mel?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually much more common than we think.
Mm.
If you look at worldwide, this happens pretty frequently, unfortunately. So the first tip is, I have 5 tips for you. The first tip is leave while you can, because
Yeah.
prevention is the best strategy. So if you're unintentionally bumping up against 1 or 2 people, it's a good sign, and you don't mean to. It's a good sign that the crowd is density is thickening, and that you need to sort of move to safer ground. Look around to see where the crowd is thinning. Head that way. Remember to look up for escape routes like fences or ledges, but avoid barriers you can't climb, because the first place where people start to get crushed is up against barriers that they can't get away from. The
Mm.
second tip is remain upright as much as you can. So if it's too late to leave, the most important thing to do is to maintain your balance. Um, and the way to do that is to sway with the crowd. Don't resist. So just go with the movement of the crowd, because
Hmm.
it moves like a wave. The third thing is protect your air. So oxygen is the most important thing. Avoid screaming unless you absolutely have to. Control your breathing and then fold your arms up in front of you like a boxer to protect your rib cage and give yourself enough room to breathe. And then the next thing is, and I'll condense it down to 4. Help those around you. Research shows that mutually assisting other people is the key to avoiding tragedy. So, a united crowd, is more likely to survive than a crowd where everybody is for themselves, right? So, remain humane. Avoid tripping up those around you. Look out for the weakest members of the group. That's going to benefit everybody, yourself included.
Thanks so much.
Good tips.
Those are great tips. And rest in peace to the 9 people now that
Absolutely.
perished. Okay.
Yes.
So sad. He had been in a coma, right? Yeah.
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 All right. Well, let's go to exercise and better mental health. Who can't use some mental wellness tips,
That was supposed to be me, right? Because I'm in such great
especially
shape.
during COVID? Low exercise definitely contributes to low mental wellness stuff. Dr. Mel,
Yes, it
what should we
does.
be doing?
And look, I read this and I have to say, this is me. I discovered walking during the pandemic, and it has been the key to my mental health for real, for real. So they did a study. They saw that low physical activity was associated with higher rates of anxiety and depression over a 3-month period of time during the pandemic. And the results were consistent across any demographic you can think about: young, old, white, Hispanic, Black, Asian. It didn't matter. The less time you spent outdoors was the higher rates of anxiety and depression compared with anxiety and depression scores compared with no change in time outdoors. So if you're not spending time outdoors, you have a higher rates of anxiety and depression. So even if you're not necessarily exercising, just getting outside, experiencing nature, getting some fresh air is bound, seeing some sunlight, getting that vitamin D in, bound to increase your mood. So
All right.
really important.
All right. So you know what time it is. We you know what time it is, y'all? What time is
Yep.
What time is it?
Debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
it? Tyrone Twitterfinger said, I heard if I take the COVID vaccine, it will leave me paralyzed. So that's my reason for not taking it.
Tyrone, I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Mel, is that true?
Well, let me put it in context, because we know that vaccines are not 100% safe. Nothing is. We've had 3.2 billion people who've been vaccinated against COVID worldwide. So we have lots more experience for all those people that wanted to wait and see, lots more experience beyond the clinical trials. And it turns out that an extremely rare side effect is seen with vaccines, but it's seen way more with COVID infection. And I think what Tyrone is talking about is Guillain-Barre, which is a nerve condition where it usually happens after a viral infection. So it's not unique to COVID. Your body can form antibodies to the sheath around your nerves, and it can result in weakness. So a recent study shows that it happens way more in people who are test positive for COVID-19 than in those who have received the COVID vaccine. So let me give you the numbers. The analysis showed that there were 38 excess cases of Guillain-Barre syndrome per 10 million people. So 38 per 10 million people after receiving one specific vaccine, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. And that's most similar to the J&J vaccine in terms of the way they work. That's compared to 4 times as many after the COVID vaccine. So I want to also give you some other numbers. the risk of getting hit by lightning is 20 in 10 million. So not that far off from the rate of getting Guillain-Barre after the AstraZeneca vaccine. For comparison sake, also, there were 34 cases of flesh-eating bacteria among people who got tattoos last year. That's a rate of about 21 per 10 million. But I don't see people saying, oh, I'm not going to get tattoos because of that rare possibility of having flesh-eating bacteria that will devour your flesh and eat your arm or whatever body part the tattoo was in. And so just like that, because this is a very, very, very rare instance, it's not something that should seriously go into a decision about whether to get vaccinated, given that it happens much more in people who get COVID and it's extremely rare. So that's my answer for Tyrone. Hope that he thinks about it in a different light in terms of the risk benefit analysis in terms of getting vaccinated.
Okay, I'll tell him stop texting me. so look.
No, because he has good questions. So.
We gonna keep it moving. We're gonna see you in the next segment, huh? Dr.
All
Mel?
right.
All right.
Yep, absolutely. So, we are going to shift gears now, and we are going to talk about, is the creative community, the artistic community, is there a greater amount of vaccine hesitancy and resistance in this community? And, there are no statistics. I look for this. But along with our guests who are coming from the artistic community, we're going to really talk about that in light of the fact that the entertainment industry is dependent on people getting together, gathering together in crowds. Many performers suffered serious economic losses and hardship because of the pandemic, restricting the ability to gather. And then many in the industry have died even after vaccines have become available because of the hesitancy about getting vaccinated. So we're going to start off looking at a video of a previous segment where I was able to sit down with Tanisha Brooks, who's a branding, marketing, and design professional for creative individuals and organizations who wish to stand out with style. She is a fabulous graphic designer, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her decision to get vaccinated.
2, 1.
Hi, Tanisha. It is wonderful to have you as our guest tonight on Excuse Me, Doctor. You have such a profound journey in terms of getting to the decision to get vaccinated for COVID-19. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. When the pandemic started, I was actually reduced in force, and so I was working mainly from home. And although I was very selective about where I went, I was not really at all enthused about getting the vaccination when it first came out because I just thought everything was too fast. And so, my thought was, AIDS and all kinds of things have been around for a while, and they've been looking for cures for that. And so, how could COVID vaccinations be ready so quickly? But I started watching you and listening to some of the health professionals in my network. And so I started thinking about it. I was very careful about where I went because I live with my father. And my primary goal was not to bring anything home to my father. And so I kind of lived an isolated life. And so when I started to want to venture out, specifically, I went to a gathering and we were socially distanced. But I remember feeling so guilty being out in public and not being vaccinated that I immediately, once I once I had that interaction, I immediately started looking at scheduling myself for a vaccination. So I I actually went into a place. I didn't really know how it worked. I didn't know you
Mhm.
made an appointment. I thought I could just go get a vaccination. Well, I quickly learned that I could not do that. I went and made an appointment, and specifically, I was going to go one place and ended up going to another place. And it was made a suggestion to me to take a particular shot, and so I found that that shot wasn't offered immediately in my vicinity, so I had to go out and find it. And so
Mhm.
once I committed to getting the shot, I
Yeah.
committed to getting the shot that I wanted to get and did
Mhm.
my research. And I've done that. And actually, I would tell everybody, if you're on the fence about getting the shot, think about not only of yourself, but your loved ones and the people around you. I, my brother
Yeah.
got COVID early, and I remember being upset with him for getting COVID because he was letting people in his space. And we had just rekindled our relationship. So I was thinking that my time was getting cut with him. And then also, I've
Mhm.
experienced some loss due to COVID. So it is a very jarring thing. It's a very polarizing thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're on the fence about it, I would tell you, consider it, heavily consider.
Well, thank you so much, Tanisha, for sharing your story. And I think many people can relate to the fact that there was some hesitancy early on when it came to making the decision. Her reasons had to do with, how quickly the vaccine was developed. But we're going to talk more as I bring in my two wonderful guests who've joined us tonight, who will sort of pick up on this thread of vaccine hesitancy in the creative community. Our first guest is Michelle Blackwell. She's a Washington, D.C. native, a performing and recording artist of go go music. She is the author of Love and Go Go and executive producer of her album Body of Work. She's a committed community activist and currently is the project manager and consultant for the Black Coalition Against COVID. Welcome, Michelle. We are so pleased to have you.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Mel. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. We are also joined by Kokai. He is a preeminent improvisational vocalist, Grammy nominated musician who's heard on over 60 titles spanning jazz, hip hop, rock, and R&B. He's a music educator, emissary with the US State Department, and recipient of numerous fellowships, grants, and awards. Thanks for being here, Kokai.
Thank you, Dr. Mel, for having me. For sure.
Absolutely. And so we are going to also be joined by our two co-producers, Wayne and Lila, who, as I mentioned before, know people who've been affected by COVID, unfortunately, who've lost their lives, just as Tanisha indicated in her video. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to start with Michelle. What are you hearing from your colleagues in the DC music community, especially the go-go community, and very maybe starting even more basic for our listeners in Alaska? What is
Mhm.
go-go? You might need to start there.
Well, yes, thank you again. And hey, Kokai, thank you everyone for tuning in. So, go-go music is a form of music that started here and is indigenous to Washington, D.C., with its branches stretched very early on into Maryland and Virginia and in surrounding areas. It is a percussive, heavy form of music that was started from the Godfather, who we call the Godfather of Go-Go, who is the Godfather of Go-Go, Chuck Brown, and of course artists like Sugar Bear from EU and Trouble Funk. Go-Go has its fingerprint in many, many other genres like R&B, hip hop, jazz, and is recognized by many artists all over the world, and is beloved here in Washington, D.C. But the best way to describe go-go is what I tell everybody now, which is a little more difficult now because we're in the pandemic, but you kind of have to be there. So in a sense, you
And
need to get out to a go-go. And
right. And so with being there and I mean there's nothing like experiencing go-go live. Um what are you did concerts really ever stop in the go-go community here in DC and elsewhere during the pandemic?
yes. So in the beginning, so the lockdown officially happened in the first week of March. I know that personally because that was my last show was on, I believe, March the 7th or 11th in 2020. And in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, there was a general lockdown. So no bands were playing. However, once word got out that there were certain parts in Maryland and in Virginia that were not as strict when it came to their gathering policy, some of the bands started to perform there. I would say late May, early June, maybe. They start to perform again. Not all, and not myself. I actually have not performed since the lockdown, and I know a lot of bands are performing, but I'm still biding my time, trying to wait until it's safer for me. And I'm kind of following the science. And but I'm looking forward to being back on stage, and I definitely am praying for my fellow artists and go-go artists and musicians and the fans themselves to just be safe.
Absolutely. So, what are you hearing, Kokai, amongst your colleagues in terms of um, excitement about getting vaccinated?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that it's not everybody's not excited, right? You have the skeptics, and rightfully so. So, we're talking about a group of people, we're talking about mostly black and brown people who systemically have been subject to experiments, right, by the government over time, right? If we, people talk about Tuskegee experiments, talk about all the atrocities that have happened to us historically, and so, but people are starting to try to bring those same that skepticism into what's happening today. And some of the things that I'm hearing from some people that I respect is kind of weird because it's the similar thing to Twitter fingers do, asking wild questions like these are people that I know that have done many things before, and as musicians, as working musicians, we've already had to take vaccines. So before pre-pandemic, if I wanted to travel to Africa or China, I had to have the yellow card. Like they still required the yellow card to get certain visas in certain spaces. And that yellow card had vaccinations that you had to get, like meningitis, or you had to be vaccinated against malaria. You had to get it for yellow fever. You had to get it for hepatitis A, B, and C. Like those were all vaccines that you needed before you could travel out of the country. And so what I'm finding is some people are like, yeah, I can't get this vaccine because, I don't know what they putting in it, or the government wants to track you, or weird. It's all sorts of stuff happening. But I think what happens is because we've been in a pandemic and people have been sitting in the house with their thoughts for too long, sometimes, your thoughts plus sci-fi be out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, so Michelle, what are some of your thoughts as to why maybe some of your colleagues may be a little bit more reluctant to get vaccinated?
Well, I've just observed. So first, I've been a full time performer since I'm going to say 2000, 2001, and I had always thought, and I know I'm not alone. I always thought that we were kind of an industry that was foolproof. Like there was nothing really that could stop,
Mhm.
aside from a bomb dropping on, on the country, people from partying. Like people were always going to want to party, no matter if we were in a recession, a depression. It didn't matter. You had your juke joints back in the day. You got your go-go's now. People always want to come out, and so I think the industry was shocked, in particular the go-go industry or just the entertainment industry was shocked
Mm-hmm.
that we were affected so thoroughly by this pandemic because we're so dependent on people coming out and things of that nature. So I think there was like this ambivalence towards the whole idea of COVID. We're just disgusted by the whole thing. People are losing thousands of dollars. So anything having to do with whether it was social distance, gatherings, masks, all of that was kind of, the opposite of what, you think about when you're going out to have fun.
Mhm.
And so when the vaccine, came on board, that was just yet another something else, I think, that just made, that by then I think people were already kind of turned off by the whole situation. So that, I think that probably plays a role.
Yeah.
I think also it was the political climate too. So you're looking at a perfect storm of what's been going on. You got a lot of skeptics, people with conspiracy theories, the 4chan folks, the QAnon people going off and on, everybody talking about the mark of the beast, and you got the Trumpers, you got all kinds of wild stuff happening at the same time, and people just feeding all sorts of, and you had a president at the time who was anti-fax, right? Just the facts the facts were not necessary. It was, you could go sip some bleach and be all right. Like, can't we just inject that? I mean, we could just inject some Clorox, right? Like things that you would never do.
Or shine some ultraviolet light in us.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, so all the crazy, and then like attributing the virus to a specific space. And if, like, honestly, it just felt to me like I have to be watching. This is a movie. This is a sci-fi movie, because people are spouting sci-fi facts. They spouting the sci-fi conspiracies, and then we living in sci-fi because you got the president talking about, if I shine a light on myself and drink Clorox, we'll be fine. Like, don't believe those scientists. Believe my friend over there who's never had a degree in anything except English. Like, come on, dog. Like, it was that type of thing. And I think that
exactly
added to it.
Yeah.
You muted, Doc.
Doc, we can't hear you, Dr. Mel.
You got to come back.
Michelle, I have a question for you while we're waiting on Dr. Mel. So you haven't performed since the early shutdown. How have you fed, this is just a sidebar question, but how have you fed that creative energy if you're not doing live performances? Are you doing virtual stuff?
So full disclosure, so the shutdown was in March. At the time, my grandmother, who was 91 years young at the time, was already hospitalized from a fall, and at the end of April, she passed from COVID. So she actually recovered somewhat from the fall and the subsequent, consequences of that, and was sent to a rehabilitation place over in Bethesda, where a week later she caught COVID and then she passed. And that was extremely traumatic for me. It was extremely traumatic for me on many, many levels. And my grandmother was a physician who I know, and anyone knows, my grandmother knows, if she were alive, not only would she have gotten a vaccine, but she'd be out there dragging people inside of Howard to get vaccinated herself. So it was really heartbreaking for me. And it was hard for me. I was traumatized. And as Dr. Mel spoke on earlier, that was in the middle of the lockdown. We were restricted from movement. So all going out to walk and all that kind of stuff, we weren't even able to do that. I had just started working. Thankfully, I was able to get another job because, again, I was performing full time. So I was concentrating on that. So I was able to kind of like pour myself into my work in that regard. But it's been a struggle for me. And then also my release, how I would normally relieve my stress, which was the stage, which has been the stage for 20 years, was not there for me. So, and then I'm missing my crowd. So it's been really hard, but I've been writing. So here's how I've been doing. I've been writing, working on my second album, finishing up my second book, pouring myself, I can't perform live. Virtual is kind of tricky, as people have been they've experienced when it comes to go-go, because the crowd band is such a symbiotic thing. Like, we really, really depend on one another to kind of make the magic happen. I haven't ruled it out now that things have been extended, but so I've just been writing and focusing on my comeback, which is happening.
And yes, it is. And let me just say, Michelle's grandmother was not just a physician. She was a probably 4'9", 4'11", 5'1", somewhere in there, powerhouse of a woman, even at 91. psychiatrist, just an incredible physician and human being. So I want to pick back up on what Kokai was saying. You know, we're a year later, right, from that administration, and you know, in light of all the death, the economic losses that have happened in the artist community, those people who are still holding out, what do you say to them? Especially, and let me just say, especially, let's say, you know, you just came off tour and you're on stage with them, and you're in close quarters in studios having to record with them or perform with them. What do you say to those people who haven't been vaccinated and are in close quarters with you?
Well, first, they're not going to be in close quarters with me. Like, so that's
That part.
I mean, even
Okay.
we either or you just gonna have on your mask. Like, I'm gonna be talking to you through this mask, and that's how we're gonna keep it moving. You know, I actually just came back off a tour, touring Europe, and we all, you know, everybody was vaccinated. We all wore a mask. It was part of our rider that if you wanted to talk to the band, you had to wear your mask. Like, we put in all the protocols because we knew that the first person to catch COVID, the tour was over, and I haven't been
Right.
on the road in 2 years.
Wow.
So I had to
Right.
relearn road chops, like what to do, what not to do, how to cross the street. Like, it was just regular stuff that you took for granted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had to get my airport chops back, like how you know when to get in line, what to do with your airline miles, what the lounge looked like. Like, it was all kinds of, you know, just stuff getting back to that, and then thinking about the stage dynamic and watching the crowds in different places. So to what I say to my friends are, so it depends on who your friends are. Like I said, the
Mm-hmm.
friends that I have that are super skeptical and they talk about the health benefits and they feel like they being forced to do something, I feel like they caught up in that same skepticism that's been going on for a while, and you really not going to convince them with logic, right? Because they, you know, they in skepticism space. But for those of us, like the ones I could talk to, I feel like, listen, it's like, look, man, you the same person, or young lady, you the same person that go out smoke hookah behind people. You know, you the same person that used to smoke weed that somebody done spit on the blunt and you was passing that joint around. You ain't had no problem. You was the same person that went and got the yellow card, you know, and got all the shots before you had to go to a foreign country. You drink after people. You would drink the Henny out the bottle right after somebody else. You was, you know, we all, you know, we know you was flagrant in your dealings with folks. You know what I'm saying? Because you know, you big wild geeking out this job. Like, so all of that stuff, like, come on, Slim. Like, a vaccine, really? Like, oh, the government's trying to track me, but you walk around with a cell phone in your hand,
A
you
new
know,
cell phone.
right, a brand new cell phone with the chips in it, right?
Right.
I don't want you to have, you know, they can't come. I don't want them all up in my DNA when you got a biometric passport. Like, come on, Slim. Like, all the stuff you did, they already got facial recognition. You already in the
Come on,
system. You
Kokai.
already done stuck your fingerprints on everything. You touch everything all day. You got your fingerprint in your car. You think your car ain't connected to the internet while you walk around with Apple CarPlay or Android CarPlay in your car? Come on, Slim. You use GPS every day. They tracking you. It's been Facebook already been tracking you. You on Facebook 9 million times a day, halfway putting all your information up there, answering every question in the book. You know what I mean? That they ask you, what's your first puppy name? And you out here, Big Red. That was my first puppy. Like, you just out here giving up all your information, giving up all your biological data. You out here already put yourself all up in the system. Why you tripping now? Like, this is the hill. Like, Hennessy and Coke, and then follow that up with the blunt, and then go smoke hookah, and then rub on 5 people way before the pandemic, you know, and then tell me your face itch, you know, later. Now you want to talk about you safety. Now I'm about safety. Like, I don't want to catch nothing. Like, come on, stuff. Killing
Well,
me.
you
Uh,
make some
Like,
you
I
make some
can't.
excellent points there. You make some excellent points, and yeah, I mean all of that ditto. Um, so Michelle, I want to ask you. You know, a lot of artists that I talk with are very much into being holistic and natural health and natural medicine. I know I've heard Dr. Sebi's name come up a lot, and are very much into, you know, their natural medicine proponents. Do you find that it's a factor with people who, um, with artists who might be, you know, more focused on the holistic living, maybe not the ones that are drinking Henny out the bottle, like Kokai said?
Some of them
the
do it
reason
too.
why, honestly, why he said that was because he knows that when it comes to a musician's life, and if you've been in this business as long as we have, it's not unheard of for trips not just to IHOP or the breakfast spot or what's the place up on Wisconsin
Denny's.
Avenue.
Anything.
But also, even 7-Eleven, they eating the smoky big bites and all kind of stuff, like the lifestyle. And then, the chicken in the club and the fries in the club and everything. It's not your health to begin with, honestly, for a lot of them. But one thing I do appreciate is that the pandemic has made people a lot more health conscious because they're thinking of different ways, even though you have doctors who are pro-vax and are also pro, healthy living and herbal and natural remedies, that they're more health conscious. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're more health conscious, and that's the reason why. But I think the pandemic has helped us in that regard. But if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Kokai something about his journey in performing again, because it's been one of my biggest anxieties of trying to figure out. Because I know in the beginning I would get, first of all, I've gotten many requests from promoters, and asking, when am I going to come back? We're going to make sure it's this, we're going to make sure it's that. But I remember, asking certain questions about, safety protocols, and some people would be like, oh, okay, Michelle, and kind of the way they said it, let me know. I'm not even going to go there because it's going to be kind of hellish for me. So how was your experience overseas as opposed to how we probably experience things with venues here? I don't know.
No,
And
Go
I
ahead,
would just want to tack onto that the emphasis on the overseas versus the United States.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I do want to digress. My friends who have kept the same energy with never getting a vaccine ever, right? So I have friends like that too. They going sea moss it. They going vitamin C, apple cider vinegar it all the way out. They never took a vaccine ever, never. For those people, I'm like, keep riding. You gotta keep the same energy. And I also have a friend who has autoimmune disease, and he's like, I can't take the vaccine. Like it'll do something to me. So I'm like, all right. I mean, or maybe he needs a better opinion, but he said he can't take it because of his autoimmune disease. So we can have a
I can
discussion on that.
address that autoimmune disease is not a reason to not
Okay.
take the vaccine, and I would encourage him to talk to his healthcare provider, rheumatologist, whomever who's seeing
Okay.
him for that. The American Society of Rheumatology has recommended that even people with autoimmune diseases get vaccinated. And
Okay.
as for the sea moss and the vitamin C and apple cider vinegar, black seed oil, echinacea, golden seal, vitamin D, vitamin C, etc. Those things are great. I don't have anything against them, but they do not build antibodies. They don't create antibodies against COVID, and they don't prevent the spread of COVID like the vaccine
Right.
diminishes the spread of COVID and helps protect those around you. So anyway,
Thank you.
sorry,
No,
back to
no.
overseas.
So the overseas, I just wanted to address that too, because I know that I have friends that have never ever gotten a vaccine of any kind.
Wow.
Right. And so I didn't want to lump them in with the
Right,
folks
I got you.
who got vaccines before, but now
Yeah.
all of a sudden that they're Dr. Spock or whoever. Right. So
Makes sense.
for the overseas thing, like America's typhoid Mary when you talk about being overseas on tour. So other protocol, and other countries that had it just as bad as us, their protocols are way different. So the way that we had an excellent tour manager. Shout out to my man Dimitri, who is an excellent tour manager, because he's a nice fellow, but when he got to be mean, he mean, and he's not. He's like, no, the rider said, like, so that was one of them things. So if you're not the person, like Michelle, I would say this: if you're not the person that want to tell people no, go get you somebody who thorough. Like, I'm not. You're gonna spray the microphone. You're gonna spray the microphone, and everybody gonna wear their mask. And you're gonna spray all the microphones, and this is how we're gonna do this. And it's gonna be 6 feet from the edge of the stage to the audience. And it's gonna be, if you want to come talk to me and you don't have no vax papers, then you need to put on this mask. Like, it's just that. That was the thing that made me feel comfortable. Because trust me, I was nervous. I was super nervous getting on the plane. I was looking at people funny. I was getting ready to snitch on everybody who had their mask under their nose. I'm like, what are you doing? He got his mask on his nose. He got his mask on his nose. Like, he coughing. Like, I was just like, it was nervous. Listen, I was snitching. I was like, somebody over there coughing. I don't understand what's going on. Somebody need to get them. That's particulates in the air.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I was out there.
Right.
So yeah, of course. But when I hit the stage, when I saw what everybody was doing, that was the thing that made me calm down, because I was like, oh, everybody trying to have a good show. And in Belgium, in particular, that was my first stop. Everybody was, not only did they have to have the green pass, which is the universal pass that the EU has, that the United States has not figured out yet, how to get a universal pass. So everybody who's been vaccinated could just show a QR code, which makes a lot of sense, but we seem to can't get it together. The European Union has done that.
Right. Well, I think that has to do with how political it's been over here. And I want to make sure we get in some audience questions, because I know they're out there. So Wayne and Lila, what you got? What you got?
Lie?
So this question is for everybody. Wayne, Dr. Mel, Kokai, and Michelle, are you all aware of any resources for creatives who may not have insurance? So this is beyond the vaccination. What free or low cost resources are available to creatives who don't have insurance, particularly in the DMV area?
Obamacare.
Yeah, I was going to say, and if you're talking about health insurance, the ACA is the way to go. I mean, they have the Maryland Exchange, the DC Exchange, the Virginia Exchange,
right?
And that's honestly, what I've been using since 2008, 2009, when the ACA was passed. As an entrepreneur, I was very grateful when I was able to finally afford it. And we're still talking about spending hundreds of dollars a month, but it wasn't quite what it could have been had that not happened. So if you don't qualify, then there are measures to help you out. And then also they have things out there for creatives. If you've had economic hardship, look into that. Call your local councilman, and find out what they have offered. They just did a go-go grant for go-go artists and musicians who suffered hardship, and they have different programs, I'm sure, in different cities. But in this area, there are programs available.
I would also like to say Music Cares.
I was about to say.
For the people, and you don't have to be a Grammy member. So that's a Grammy a Recording Academy program, but you don't have to be a Grammy member, and that's where some of us, fall short. I'm not a part of the Grammy, so I can't use that. No, it's especially for you. It's especially for you to come out and get taken care of by other musicians and other people who've poured into creatives' lives. So I would say that also.
And then I would add, lastly, for those whose income doesn't qualify them for an ACA program, they can also consider Medicaid. That is also an option. And there are also federally qualified health clinics, also known as free clinics, quote unquote, that do offer excellent medical care. They'll see you on a sliding scale based upon your income. And you could just look them up on the internet in your city.
So I want to go to some of the questions. Lila, that was a great question, and thanks for asking that. I want to go to some of the questions, and some of them are funny, and I'm going to get to, Lila and Dr. Mel always say that I don't get to people's questions who are a little different, right? Different. Can I say different?
Different.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cool. Come on. But I'm going to take this one, because a person just looked at the panel. She's watching. She doesn't have any of our health records, but she says, I'm seeing a lot of comorbidities on the panel. Will that be included in the conversation?
Okay.
So what's the question?
I'm
seeing
seeing
the chubby face. She's seen a lot of chubby faces, and she's thinking just because you're
overweight, you got comorbidities. Comorbidities. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of comorbidities on the panel, she says. Will that be included in the conversation?
Well, God bless her.
Okay.
We've had several conversations about comorbidities, but go ahead, Dr. Mel.
Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah,
Mel.
I was just going to say that comorbidities, whether they be obesity, diabetes, lung disease, kidney disease, heart disease, sleep apnea, Mental health disorders, actually, depression and anxiety, all those put you at higher risk for COVID-19. And in addition, are not reasons to avoid taking the vaccine, are actually reasons to take the vaccine because they, those individuals were studied in a clinical trial. Information has been collected on the, what did I say, 3.2 billion people who've been vaccinated across the world. Many of them have had comorbidities, and it's found that the vaccine is protective as well as safe in those in people who have other health conditions,
Yeah,
and
I
help
got
keep them out of the hospital.
I got the shot. I'm gonna get the booster. I also hit the gym and run 2 miles. And if you want Joan in real life, you can come see me.
Hey,
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 I got
you
know
know
me,
what?
dog. I
Trust me,
I
you
can
don't
talk
want to
time.
see my
Stop
man.
playing,
you
Slim.
really
Stop
don't.
playing,
You
Slim.
really
You
don't
probably
want to see my
plus,
man.
you know, make sure your teeth straight because that'll mess with your heart. But if that don't apply to you, then jobless. But they're Padre Santo Cucina New Espiritu Santi.
All
So
right, go
okay,
ahead, Lila.
so
South, yeah, because y'all
um,
know this is the Southeast y'all talking to right now. You can bump with the
so
best.
I my partner is actually a musician who has not been on tour since March of 2020 and ramping up for a tour now. Um, but what I have discovered in talking to him, this is just an observation. What I've discovered in talking to him and preparing for this tour is there are a lot of promoters and tour managers and artists who are not allowing musicians to travel with them if they are not vaccinated.
Come on.
So some of this is going to continue to mess up money.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to tour or go do live shows, there are a lot of places that you cannot perform as a creative if you do not get vaccinated. So just something else to consider.
Yeah,
Right.
And it has
nobody
been a
wants that
motivator for a
liability.
lot of people. What you
Mhm.
say, Coca?
Nobody wants the liability. Like
Mm-hmm.
honestly, you
Right,
if we start this tour and we start rolling and one person in the band catch COVID, it's a wrap for everybody. It's a wrap.
right.
The whole bus is shut down. So if it's 14 of y'all on the road and y'all got 14 city date and you get sick on the second city and now you got quarantine for 7 days, that's 7 canceled shows.
Right.
Everybody trying to mess with you.
Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Mel,
Right.
Dr. Mel, can I just
Yeah,
ask you to
please
address
do.
something really quickly because obviously in this area now that everything is kind of ramped back up and bands are performing on a regular basis, they're not experiencing these same kinds of restrictions. So just from a practical standpoint, from a health and safety standpoint, can you please offer my fellow artists and musicians and the people who I care about, our supporters, even the ones who I have not performed in front of, but I still love and care about, can you offer them some safety tips if they're going to continue to do this and then they don't have these protocols so that they can kind of self-govern in a more safety conscious way? Could you provide some tips and advice for our, because we're talking about maybe a few hundred people in a venue every Friday and Saturday.
Yeah,
They're close together. I'm seeing the videos. I love y'all, but truth is truth. I'm not seeing is
Yeah.
masks. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
so just
know.
talk about that, please.
Absolutely. I mean, I know a lot of indoor venues have opened back up. I mean, I've even been to a concert at the Blue Note in New York, and people were crammed in like sardines. I was very nervous about it, but we for the musicians and for the audience, I would say be vaccinated. A lot of these venues are requiring vaccination cards to be admitted. Wear your mask if you're not eating or drinking, and if you are eating and drinking, take sips in between and put the mask back on. I think that's the safest way to go about it. Kokai mentioned some excellent ones regarding the stage itself, sanitizing the mics, and making sure that you, if possible, are 6 feet away, especially from the singers and the anybody who's going to be opening their mouth and singing, and the wind instruments. If possible, keep them apart from everybody else and at least 6 feet back from the audience so that they're not exposing everybody else. And wear your mask when you're not on stage. I would even submit that those people who aren't singing and playing woodwind instruments should be wearing their masks on stage. I mean, I think that's really the safest way to go about it.
So I would like to say, you know, in my 30 years of being in the industry, you know, this virus. The reason I do this show with Dr. Mel is this changed just the face of everything we know, right? And so, in coming back off of this, I had a pretty big concert and was at a venue that required that everybody either be vaccinated or take a PCR test or take a COVID test at least 48 hours.
There's at
Actually,
least 25,000 people there in an outdoor venue, right?
25,000 people in an outdoor venue. But then I had so I music directed a lot of artists. We did a show that had a lot of artists on the show, a tribute to Bill Withers. And for the rehearsal, things start at rehearsal. Things don't, by the time you get to the concert, you know, you've already checked the 8 musicians on stage, 8 to 10 musicians on stage. And I had that written into the protocol. 8 to 10 musicians on stage. I need you to check. We going to rehearse all week. I need 3 tests. You know, a test before you get here, a test while we here, and a test before 48 hours before we start. And that's important for making the artist feel comfortable. Then I was dealing with an artist the next day that wasn't vaccinated. And so, who was a singer. So her prerequisite was you have to have a negative PCR test. I don't want to see an antigen test. I don't want to see that 50-50 junk. I don't really want to see that. I need to see a PCR test. And then, and only then, and then she was 10 to 12 feet away from us at all times singing. You know, it was really a 12 feet, 20 feet from stardom type thing. So, you know, it starts before you get on the bus, Lila, you know, and I'm quite sure, you know, those who are taking protocol that you don't want to travel with people who aren't vaxxed because they may not get in the venue.
Right. I mean, go ahead, Dr. Mel.
No, go ahead, Lila.
I was just going to say, so my partner's a musician, but I work in TV and film. And so, you know, everything, I live in Los Angeles, everything got shut down. Productions got shut down until those white papers could get written and protocols could be in place. And I'm talking about A zone, B zone, C zone, D zone, certain protocols, certain PPE from one zone to the next. You're getting tested the day before, you're getting tested on site. I mean, and so just to throw back to what Tanisha said in video, this is a community responsibility. This is not just about ourselves. I said this last week. We got to be community minded about protecting each other.
Right.
And unfortunately, as rich as this discussion is, I just looked at the time and realized, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I am so impressed by everything that you all have had to say. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for that wonderful note that we just ended on, that this entertainment and art is a community experience. It's a community experience to be enjoyed together, to be created together. And as much as individual autonomy is important, in a pandemic, we have to think about each other. And so I'm just going to wrap up by thanking you all for being here. Thank you to my wonderful producers. And just encourage everybody out there. Like I said, vaccines aren't perfect, but they're the most perfect thing we have right now in order to protect ourselves, protect our families, protect our communities and our loved ones, along with the testing that Wayne brought up, along with the masking protocols, along with the social distancing protocols. Those are the best ways to stay safe and still be able to earn money at our crafts, what we love to do, and to be able to enjoy the healing benefits of art and music. So thank you to my panel tonight. I will be back in the morning on the Russ Parr Morning Show. So if you're awake at 7:45 a.m., I will be there. Next week is a bye week. It's a National Holiday Week. There's Thanksgiving and the important birthday of one of my co-producers. And so we are taking next Monday off. But we will be back on November 29th. And so I hope you join us then. And if I don't see you between now and then, please remember to be wise, to be well, and to be health empowered. Thanks for joining.